Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna give everybody just another minute to have an opportunity to log on. Uh, in the meantime, let me just do a quick intro. So, obviously, a lot of things have been changing. In fact, just yesterday there was an update with the funding for the PPP and EIDL. So I've updated the slides to make sure I cover the changes, and so there may be changes that occur while we're doing this presentation. I'll provide an update to everyone if anything does change after the presentation. But give me one moment just to get my slide set up here right now. Okay. All right. And so this stream is being broadcasted on Facebook Live and also on our website. If you want to join the conversation on Facebook, you can just click on the video that's streaming on our website, and then that should take you to Facebook Live. Otherwise, you can watch the broadcast on our website. There is a comment section below this video if you're watching on the website. If you have questions, you can leave your question in the comment section and we'll get to it. Either Herbert will answer during the presentation or I'll get to it at the end. And so let's get started. Let me get these slides up here. All right, so today's topics, just a quick intro. So we'll talk about the stimulus relief payments. These are those payments that individuals should be receiving whether you're a business or not. We'll talk about who qualifies, if you need to do anything to receive it, and how to track your payments. Some of you may have already received your payments, some may not, so I'll talk about that. I'm going to talk about the expanded unemployment benefits, and specifically who qualifies for it, how much you can expect to receive, and how to apply for it. And then finally, I'll talk about the PPP and EIDL, how they had a lapse in appropriations. They basically ran out of money. The good news is that it looks like they are going to inject some new funds into the program very shortly. But I'll talk about what this means for you, whether you've applied, whether you haven't applied, or even if you've gotten funding. I'll talk about, if you've already submitted an application, what to expect, and what you should just do in general now. And then finally, we'll close off with a Q&A session. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alan Mediani. I am a CPA. I am the CEO of Mediani Financial Management. We are a tax firm. We specialize in working with small to mid-sized businesses and individuals. And so the primary focus of the topics that I discuss will be geared towards, again, those small to mid-sized businesses and individuals. And let's get started with the stimulus relief payments that everyone is so anxiously waiting for. And again, some people may have already received it, but let's talk about who qualifies to receive it. The stimulus relief payments are going to be $1,200 for individuals that are U.S. residents, or if you are a married couple that files your tax return jointly, it'll be $2,400, plus $500 for each qualifying child, as long as your adjusted gross income is up to the amounts that are on the screen here. So it's $75,000 for individuals. If you're a head of household filer, it's $112,500, and for married filing joint couples, the cap is $150,000. So what does that mean? That means that if your AGI, so adjusted gross income, is above those numbers, and the next piece over here is if it's for individual filers between $75,000 and $99,000, you're going to get a reduced amount. And then anything above the $99,000 for individuals, you're not going to receive anything. And then so head of household filers, anything above the $112,500 is going to get phased out up to the $136,500, and then anything above that, you won't qualify for any amount of the stimulus relief payment. And then for married filing joint couples, it's 150,000 to 198 where it phases out, and then anything above 198, you won't qualify for any of it. So one thing to note is that this credit is not available to non-residents. You do have to be a U.S. resident, and you also cannot be a dependent of another taxpayer. And so let me explain what this means. Um, in a lot of common situations that we deal with are people that have children, let's say, that they're claiming on their tax returns, but their children have income, and so the child ends up filing a tax return. If the parent is claiming the child on their tax return as a dependent, even if the child files a separate tax return, they're not going to qualify for the stimulus relief payment because somebody else is claiming them as a dependent. So it'll just be the $500 that the parent would receive for the qualifying child. And then also estates and trusts are not eligible for this. Now, let me, this note at the bottom here, let me explain how they're implementing this stimulus payment in terms of kind of reconciling the payments and making sure that everyone that should receive it does receive it. The way that this stimulus relief payment is being given to people is actually going to be a tax credit on people's 2020 tax returns. This means that when individuals file their 2020 tax return, so this will be in 2021, there will be a calculation to determine what the credit is going to be based on filing status and qualifying dependents. However, what they're doing is they're giving the payments now as an advance on that credit. So this means that if for whatever reason you have not filed a tax return in 2018 or 2019, there is a page that you are able to go to fill out kind of a simple return to get this advance now. But even if you don't do that, if you file a tax return for the 2020 tax year, you can apply and get this credit. Okay. So we're getting a lot of questions on, I haven't filed my 2019 tax return yet. Does that mean it's going to hold up or delay my stimulus payment? And the answer is no, as long as you filed a 2018 tax return. So the way that they're going about this right now in terms of giving the payments, we don't know the details of uh, who they're actually giving the payments to first. But I can tell you from experience talking with clients, we have clients that have not filed their 2019 tax returns that have already received their payment. We also have clients that have filed their 2019 returns that have not received it. So filing a 2019 return is not going to expedite the process just based on what we've seen. Okay. And so, if you are receiving a stimulus payment based on 2018 or 2019 filings, but let's say you file your 2020 tax return and your income is above the threshold. Okay, so let's say that 2020 is best year you've had. You are now above the thresholds where you qualify for the stimulus relief payment. You will not have to pay it back. Okay, so they are giving you an advance on it. But the good news is that if you still don't qualify uh, in 2020 when the credit is actually being calculated, you're not going to have to repay what you've been given. Okay. However, on the flip side, if you don't qualify for the stimulus payment based on your 2018 or 2019 return, or you are given a phased out amount, meaning a reduced amount because your income is in those thresholds where a reduced amount is calculated. If 2020 you fall below the thresholds to receive the full amount, you'll get it then when you file your 2020 tax return. Okay, so you'll get either the full amount or the difference that you still have not received based on the 2020 tax return. So a little bit of good news that you don't have to repay it if 2020 is a better year, and also if 2020 is a worse year for you. Good news is that if you didn't get the full amount, or if you had a phased out amount and now you're below the thresholds, you will get it when you file your 2020 tax return. So, do you need to do anything to receive it? The IRS has specifically provided guidance saying that no additional action is needed. If you filed a 2019 tax return already, they'll use the 2019 return to calculate your payment amount. If you haven't filed 2019 yet, they'll use your 2018 tax return to calculate your payment amount. And if you are receiving Social Security or railroad retirement benefits, and you're typically not required to file a tax return, you'll also automatically receive your payment. Now, if you do have a qualifying child, there is that simple return that you can file on the website of the IRS to claim your qualifying child and get the extra $500. Okay. Now, if you don't fall into any of these three categories, so you haven't filed a 19 return, you haven't filed an 18 return, and you're not receiving Social Security or railroad retirement benefits, um, and you still qualify, meaning you're a U.S. Resident, but let's just say you're a low-income worker, or you're on disability, so you're not required to file a tax return, but you still qualify. We have put a link on this slide, and Herbert, if you can maybe post this in the chat, that's the link to go into the IRS website and file a non-filer tax return. It's a very simple return where you just basically provide the information so that you will receive the benefit payment, or the stimulus payment, I should say. Now, the IRS has also built a payment tracker site. And so it's a portal where you go in, and I think you have to just enter your Social Security number, birthday, and your address, and it'll look up the status of your payment. Okay. Um, so for those of you who have not received a payment yet, the link is also right here on the screen. Herbert, you may want to drop this link in the chat as well, in the comment section. You can go on this. You can go to this link, put in that information, and see if you can get an update on what the status of your payment is. Now, one of the most common issues that we've seen is this screenshot right here, where it says payment status not available. This is something that we've seen across multiple different scenarios, meaning people that have filed their 2018 return but not 19 and are receiving this message, people that have filed 2019 are still receiving this message. And we've looked at their tax returns, and they're definitely below the threshold, so they should be receiving something. And so the IRS does have a frequently asked questions page where they address the fact that this could mean that you're not eligible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're ineligible. So if you are seeing this, we think that the IRS is just, their system has glitches still. It's not perfect. Obviously, this was all done extremely quickly. And so, I would say just be patient, and hopefully this will get updated, or your payment will come in without this being updated. But I want to just, people that are concerned, that are seeing this message thinking that it means that they're not eligible, and they're looking at their tax return and saying, wait, I'm below the threshold, why am I not receiving it? Just don't worry. We think it's an issue that the IRS needs to work out. It's not an issue on your part. Okay. All right. Next topic that I want to get to is the expanded unemployment benefits. And so the CARES Act basically provided three important expansions to unemployment, and the three, they call them the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, the federal pandemic unemployment compensation and pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. And so let me touch on each of these somewhat quickly. So the PUA, the pandemic unemployment assistance, that was meant to expand unemployment to self-employed individuals, which includes freelancers and independent contractors. So if you are a sole proprietor that files a Schedule C, in the past, you would not have qualified for unemployment. With the new pandemic unemployment assistance program, you now for the first time will qualify, okay, or you may qualify. The second one is the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program, and this is the one that gives you an additional $600 per week on top of what the state already offers as part of their benefits program, and this will last until July 31st. Okay. And the third is pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. And this one is basically extending the unemployment compensation period by an additional 13 weeks. So basically, the federal government is saying, whatever the state offers for the regular unemployment compensation program, we're going to add an additional 13 weeks. So what does this mean? This means it actually has impact in two ways. One, for those of you that need to stay on unemployment for longer, this will give you an additional 13 weeks. But second, if you've already used up your unemployment benefits in the past, this also opens up the ability for you to now apply and receive additional unemployment compensation. And so one thing to note is that these are federal programs. However, they are being administered by the state. So it is something that you will apply through the state. We are operating in California, and most of our clients are in California, so that would be through the EDD. So you would have to go to the EDD website or whatever the state employment development department is for your state and apply through them. Now, let's talk about, I want to talk a little bit specifically about the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, so the PUA, and this is the one that basically opens up the benefits to self-employed individuals. And let's talk about who qualifies. So if you are a business owner, self-employed individual, independent contractor, um, gig workers, so if you drive for Uber or Lyft, if you do DoorDash or Postmates, and you're considered an independent contractor, you are now going to also be eligible for these unemployment benefits. Now, one of the keys is that you must be legally permitted to work in the US, and you must have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. And again, if you're in California, the EDD does list what it means to be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. It could mean that you had to close your business down. It could mean that someone potentially has gotten sick and you're unable to work for that reason. So check out the website. It goes over the criteria of what it means to be affected by it. And also, it doesn't mean that you fully need to be out of work. If you've had a significant reduction in income, you may also qualify for the unemployment benefits. So I think that's a key one for a lot of people that are self-employed. They're like, well, I still have a little bit of money coming in, but it's been a significant drop. You may qualify, so it's advisable to apply even if you've just had a drop in income. How much you'll receive is going to depend on your state program. But what the federal government is doing is they're adding that $600 a week on top of whatever the state program is offering. Okay. And so California, again, I'm being a little bit specific just because that's where we operate and most of our clients are. California has given 3 different phases of what they're offering. Okay, so phase 1 is if you were unemployed from February 2nd to March 28th due to COVID-19 related reasons, you're going to get 167 per week. And again, this is for the self-employed individual. So this is for the pandemic unemployment assistance. Phase two is where the additional $600 a week kicks in, and that's from March 29 to July 25th. And then phase three is from July 26 on to December 26. It goes back down to the 167 per week. All right, how to apply. This is where things have been a little bit confusing. Someone asked how the unemployment benefit amount will be calculated for self-employed. So we actually don't have the exact calculations that they're going to use. I believe it's likely going to be based on net income earnings. So basically, revenue minus expenses, whatever the net amount is that's left, they may use that to calculate it. Let me go back one. They have specifically said that it's going to be the 167 per week. So that may just be a standard number in California. So in California, for self-employed individuals, if they don't come out with a calculation, which so far nothing's been presented, it may just be a standard, 167 per week plus $600 if you're self-employed. And this information that I'm showing you right here is actually right off of the EDD's website. We can post a link to that as well. Herbert, if you wouldn't mind posting the EDD pandemic website on the chat and in the comment section, that might be helpful. Another question, does the $600 stop on July 31 for us too, even though we are missing out on weeks worth of those $600 payments because we were specifically... Okay, so that's a good question. So no, so the way that the program is going to work, the pandemic one is going to be retroactive. So you can go back and apply, I believe, starting from February 2nd, even though so the application for the PUA is actually not live yet. So there's the regular application for just regular unemployment that's always been in existence. That one is live right now, but the pandemic one goes live April 28th. And when that one goes live, you'll be able to apply retroactively. So it's going to be retroactive up to February 2nd. But it's going to be from the last day that you were actually working. So if you stopped working, let's say at the end of February, that would be the date that the calculations would start on. So I hope that answers your question. So yes, even if you apply when the application goes live on February 28th, you're not going to miss the $600 a week payment from the window of March 29th, which is when it started. And so the how to apply, and here's that link that I was actually talking about where it goes over kind of the details of the entire pandemic program, so the PUA. So let's talk about application. So as I mentioned, there's two applications, one for the regular unemployment and one for the pandemic one. The pandemic one is supposed to go live Tuesday, April 28th. However, if you've already applied as a self-employed individual for the regular unemployment program, it's fine. And what we don't know for certain is if that is going to automatically translate into a pandemic application or if you need to go in and apply again. Right now, my suggestion would probably be to go ahead and submit a pandemic unemployment assistance application, even if you've done the previous one. If we get any updates with the EDD telling us not to do that, we'll let you know. But as of right now, we don't have guidance on whether you should or not. They do say that if you're uncertain of whether you should apply for the regular unemployment or the pandemic one, to just apply for the regular one and they'll make that distinction for you. So that tells me that you may not need to apply for the pandemic one if you've already applied for the regular one. And another thing is if you've done it online, there's a portal. We don't know how that portal is going to change. Right now, it just has the ability to do the regular unemployment application. Again, not enough information is available on how it's going to play out, but I'm assuming that if you've already applied, that they'll probably consider you for the pandemic unemployment assistance, and it may not hurt to go ahead and apply for it again anyways. Okay, the PPP and EIDL, so the Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loans. These are the two programs that were geared towards small businesses that basically ran out of funds. Um, it was a chaotic 2 weeks, so the program basically only lasted 2 weeks. The first few days, many banks weren't even accepting applications. It was very chaotic. And I put this on here just as a summary. I'm not going to get into the details of the programs. This is more of just an update. I did a whole presentation on these programs, so if you missed that, there is a recording available on our website. But this is just a summary of it, so I can get into what's going on with it now. So lapse in appropriations means ran out. They used up the full. I think it was 350 billion that they had. However, the good news is that just yesterday, Congress and the White House basically reached a deal to inject more capital into these programs. The Senate already voted on it and passed it, and the House is expected to vote tomorrow. And the way that it sounds, it's probably going to pass. And so what's going to happen is they're going to put in an additional 322 billion into the Paycheck Protection Program and an additional 60 billion into the EIDL program. Okay. So there's also these two other points not related to what we're talking about, but 75 billion is going towards hospitals and 25 billion for testing. But the points that we're going to talk about today are the 322 billion and the 60 billion. And so let's talk about if you've already applied or if you haven't applied. So if you've already submitted an application and you've received an SBA loan number, this should mean that funds from the first round are already allocated to you. Okay. The way that the program is working is the banks are accepting applications from the individuals that are applying, but then the banks are having to submit their own application to the SBA. They have like their own internal portal where they're submitting the application to the SBA, and the SBA is assigning a loan number, meaning that they're assigning funds to that application. And so if you've already received an SBA loan number, you should be in good shape to get your funds from the first round. However, if you've applied but you didn't get an SBA loan number, what we're hoping is that the banks are keeping your application in their queue, and when the SBA finally says, "All right, we're live again," that your application will be in line to be submitted. Okay. For the EIDL, so good news about the EIDL is if you've submitted an application, you may have already received funding for the advanced portion. I know I've talked to many people that received funding either, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. There was actually no email. So originally we thought that there was going to be some type of email sent for the advanced portion where you accept it. No emails, no communications. People woke up in the mornings, checked their bank accounts, and saw that there was a deposit made. Um, it had the acronym SBA in the deposit, and so that was the EIDL payment. Now, if you uh, have applied and haven't received anything, it could mean that they just haven't gotten to you. It could also mean that you applied a little bit later in the process and funds ran out before they got to you. However, now that the additional 60 billion is being injected, you should already be in line to receive the funds when the new amount goes live. Uh, if you haven't applied, the SBA website is not accepting new applications at the moment for the EIDL. However, for the Paycheck Protection Program, many banks are still advising their clients to apply, and we're doing the same thing. We're advising, if your bank is accepting an application, get one in with them. Most of them are working on a first come first served basis, and so getting an application in just so you're in line when the funds go live, I think is going to be extremely important. So the first round of funding was about 350 billion. That ran out in 2 weeks. They're putting an additional roughly 320 billion. The expectation is that that's going to also run out. It may run out even more quickly than the first round, because now at least the banks are, they know what they're doing. There's a little bit more clarity on the process. Originally, there was basically a lot of chaos, and banks didn't know, how to accept these applications, and were hesitant to fund them. Now that things are moving along a little bit more quickly, it's expected that the second round of funds are probably going to run out pretty quickly. And so, the sooner you submit your application for the PPP, the better. EIDL, as I mentioned, this is something that's applied directly through the SBA, and they're just not accepting applications right now. So, I would say just uh, keep track of the news in terms of when the funding is finally approved, and then apply for the EIDL if you're still interested in that as soon as the application goes live. And that just might be, again, House is supposed to vote tomorrow. Could be Friday. It could be sometime next week. We don't know. My advice would be to just check the SBA website often to see if the application has gone live again. All right. Questions. Let me kind of switch gears here. Oh, did not mean to do that. Let's see what's going on. So I'm trying to find Facebook page. I have it open in one of my tabs here. Okay. Okay. So question. Usman says, what if they use your 2018 tax return and because of that you don't qualify, but you just filed your 2019 tax return, and based on this, you should get it. I actually don't think that they're gonna look at your 2019 return if they've already done the calculation based on 2018. But what they will do, as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, is that they will look at 2020. So when you file your 2020 tax return, that's really the year in which the credit is being given. So anything that you get now is an advance on that 2020 tax credit. So if you qualify in 2020 but you didn't in 2018, you will get it when you file your 2020 tax return. Let me see here. Question. What constitutes your last day of work if you are self-employed? When you work freelance, you are working all the time but only get paid sporadically. Okay, great question. Uh, and I may not have the perfect answer because there is very little guidance as to what that means. Um, I would put your last day if you are a freelancer, the last day if you've completely just stopped receiving work, the first day that that happened. If you've had a significant reduction in your income, I would mark that as my last day. Now, the pandemic application isn't live yet, and so when it does go live, it may address some of these things. It may address the fact that you're self-employed and you don't really have a clear last day. So we're hoping that the new application is somewhat easy to navigate and addresses, Megan, what you're asking. And I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. Just it's not clear at this time. Um, okay, we have a question. What if you filed both 2018 and 2019 and you owe money and you're on the payment plan with the IRS? The website shows payment status not available, unable to determine. Okay, so that error message, the payment status not available. Again, it could mean several things. Uh, I don't have an answer as to whether it's related to you being on a payment plan or not. Um, yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. I don't know. They do have in their frequently asked questions a page where they talk about what the payment status not available could mean. And I did read it just yesterday, and I don't think it addressed anything about payment plans, unfortunately. Uh, let's see here. If you owe money to the IRS from 2018 taxes, will that hold up or affect the stimulus payment? Okay, good question. My understanding is that it shouldn't. So people that owe or are on payment plans, they should still receive the stimulus payment regardless of that. Um, and so even if so the previous question about whether you're on a payment plan and now this one about if money is owed, you should still receive your stimulus payment in either of those situations. At least that's the information that was communicated to us. Okay, so someone said I applied for unemployment and I got paperwork in the mail saying that my balance is zero. I'm self-employed 1099. Okay, yes, that's normal. So with the regular unemployment application, you are not going to qualify for anything. And so it's normal that you would have gotten something that says your balance is zero because you don't qualify for regular unemployment. However, April 28th is the date that the pandemic unemployment assistance application goes live. And so once that goes live, you should then qualify. And that could mean that they'll take this application and apply the new rules to it. Um, my suggestion would be on April 28th or after, log into your portal if you applied online and see if there's any new information there. What is the criteria for the EDD eligibility for 1099 independent contractors? Do they look at 2019 taxes, last pay, etc.? Okay, good question. Um, there isn't there isn't a lot of information on that either, and I'm sorry that I don't have clear answers for a lot of this. We don't know what they're going to look at. A lot of it might really be self-certification at this point. So it could just mean basically you go in there and you tell them that you were, a sole proprietor. Now they could obviously confirm this once your 2019 or 2020 tax returns are filed, and so it's something that uh, I would encourage people to obviously be honest about, but I don't know if they're going to request anything during the application process. Okay, so another question about if you still owed taxes. Okay. All right, great. It looks like. Let me also check our. So I'm looking at Facebook right now. I'm also going to take a peek and see if we have comments on our site. Okay, great. Okay, I'm not clear on forgiveness of PPP. So Daniel left a comment on the site. Let me take a quick peek at this and see if I can address this. I have laid off my employees as of 3/22. I hope to collect funds in the next round of funding for PPP. I understand they calculate forgiveness for only the 8-week period after the PPP. Does that mean that if funds 5/1, I don't? Okay, so I'm gonna restate this question. I'm just kind of skimming it right now. So basically, the question is about the forgiveness of the PPP loan, and I'll give you a little bit of insight as to how this is going to work. So with the PPP loan, once you get funded, the 8-week period following the time you get funded is the critical period because you need to maintain the same amount of full-time employees as you had based on two different dates. And let me actually pull this up right now and give you a nice thorough answer. Give me one moment. Okay, so basically they're going to look at either of these dates. They're either going to look at your full-time employee count from the period from January 1, 2020 to February 29, 2020, or they're going to look at the average number of full-time employees that you had during the period beginning February 15, 2019 and ending on June 30th, 2019. so to come up with your full-time employee count. And basically, whatever your full-time employee count is during that 8-week period, they're going to take that number and divide it by one of those two periods that I just mentioned. And if it's the same number, if you divide it, it'll just be one. So you get full forgiveness. If, let's say, you're during the 8-week period, you have 9 employees, but using one of the other periods that I just mentioned, you had 10. You do 9 divided by 10, you're going to get 90%. So basically 90% would be forgivable based on the full-time employee count. There is also the rule of using at least 75% of the funds for payroll costs. 25% can be for utilities, rent, or mortgage interest if you own a business property. And the other is that you can't reduce employees' wages that make under $100,000 by more than 25%. So those are the criteria. Daniel, I can have a more in-depth conversation with you after if you'd like to get into it, but that's kind of a summary of it. And let me switch back and take a peek here and make sure I'm addressing all questions. Somebody asked, do you pay taxes on unemployment benefits? The answer is federally yes, state you do not. So California does not charge you taxes on unemployment benefits you receive, but the federal government does. And with the regular application, there was a place where you could ask taxes to be withheld from your pay. You could also opt out of not having taxes withheld from your pay. I don't know if the pandemic application is going to be the same thing, but I imagine that it might be. And somebody asked, uh, somebody asked if we have not received funds yet, should we try another bank? Okay, that's actually a great question. Um, I would actually suggest applying with any bank that you possibly can. Um, and the reason being is these banks are really a mess right now in terms of how they're going about these applications. In fact, there's been some class action lawsuits filed against, I believe, Chase, Wells Fargo, and US Bank because they are saying that the way that they handled the applications wasn't on a first come, first serve basis, and that it was based on, they were giving preferential treatment to their clients that had more money there at the bank with them. And so uh, I'm hoping that the second round of funding won't be that way, but you also don't know how many applications these banks are receiving. And so if you can apply with another bank that has a shorter stack of applications and will get to yours more quickly, all the better for you, right? So the issue is going to be most banks are only accepting their own clients. We found a few lenders that were working with non-clients. One of them has completely stopped accepting applications. Another one is kind of iffy at this point. So I would try to reach out to obviously your own bank first, and then get in touch with us if you want some suggestions on other lenders to apply with. Unfortunately, there is no perfect answer right now, so that's why my suggestion would be applying from multiple banks. Just whoever gets to it first, great, right? Um, so also question. So question is coming in: if federal tax returns for 2018 and 2019 have not been filed yet, does that disqualify? So no, there is a so again, this is going to be a tax credit on the 2020 tax return. And so if you haven't filed 2018 and 2019 just because you're late, you likely won't get an advance right now. But when you file your 2020 tax return, if you qualify for it, then it'll be a tax credit on that return. And second part of the question, if 2019 federal tax filing due date is postponed to July this year, does that include state tax filings? So yes, most states have basically followed in line with the IRS. So California is one of those states. They've extended it also to July 15. Both the filing and payment deadlines have been pushed back. Um, Somebody asked if there's any point in hassling their bank for the PPP. Yeah, I mean, look, if you have a relationship at the bank, massaging those relationships could be helpful. Again, I do know that they are being sued for giving preferential treatment to their more favored clients, and so if you do have relationships there, it might not be a bad idea to see if you can get them to push your application up. And here we go, another question. Do you have to have filed 2019 returns in order to get a PPP loan? So no, there is no requirement to have filed a 2019 tax return to qualify for the PPP. That's a great question, and the answer is no. You don't need to have a 2019 return filed to qualify. Any new info for people with mixed income? If I qualify for some UI and very minimal W-2 income, but have more 1099 income, will they still consider me for PUA, or am I stuck with my W-2 UI only? That's a great question. So if you have mixed income, W-2 and 1099, um, I believe, and again, there isn't clear information on this. They haven't specified how they're going to do this. But I believe you should qualify for, I would say, the one that gives you the greater outcome. And the reason that I say that is because the calculation, I believe, is going to be different. For people that are W-2 employees, it's basically it's a percentage of your earnings, and at the state level capped at 450 a week. The federal government is adding an additional $600 a week on top of it, right? For self-employed individuals, the way that they have presented the information is that it's going to be 167 a week plus the additional 600. And so I imagine that they'll give you the more favorable one when you apply. But again, we don't have specific guidance on how that's going to be determined or handled right now. Okay, I filled out my PPP through PayPal and received paperwork to sign with a loan amount and a request for my routing number. However, while applying, I sent a quarterly payroll, and PayPal took that gross payroll form, the quarterly, and divided by 12 months instead of 3 months, causing a significant reduction in the loan amount I should have received due to a calculation error. I signed the DocuSign anyway, then realized they calculated my payroll incorrectly. Can I get them to correct the payroll amount at this time and redo the loan amount? Carl, that's a good question. That's something that you're going to have to work directly with PayPal with. I don't know if the forms are signed and you're getting funded, because like I said, what they're doing is they're submitting an application to the SBA as well, and the SBA is getting taking those funds and allocating them to you. So now for them to go back to the SBA and try to get funds reallocated, right now there is no more money. Now when there's more money injected, sure, they could allocate more to you. I don't know what that process is going to look like. So I would suggest getting in touch with PayPal, and hopefully they can do something for you, because that is unfortunate that the calculation was not done properly. For the PPP, another question from for the PPP program, does your business credit affect the application? No, it does not. So for the PPP program, I don't think they're running credit at all. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen anything where there's an indication that they're running your personal credit for the PPP program, and they're not running business credit either. For the EIDL, I do believe they are running credit. So I do have a client that applied for EIDL, and so there's advance, the grant money, which is $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. But then in excess of that, there is the loan that you can actually get from the SBA. That loan is going to depend on your individual credit. So I had a client get denied for the SBA loan due to unsatisfactory credit. And I don't know if there are any, Herbert, are there any other questions that I haven't addressed yet? I'm looking on our website right now. I don't see any more here. And let me just quickly glance at Facebook. I think it looks like I got to everyone. If I didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to us. You can also continue to comment on the Facebook feed or our website, and we can reply on either of those platforms. And if you still need assistance, please don't hesitate to give us a call or shoot us an email. All right, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it.